So here we are back again with the Church Guy and the Addict. I'm Don and I'm the Church Guy.
And I'm Danny, and I'm the addict. Welcome.
Hey Danny, how are you today?
Wonderful.
Good.
Pleasure.
Um, I guess I should mention too, since today we're going to be actually answering a question that we received somebody that if people have questions, they can send them to the Church Guy and the Addict at gmail.com. And that's pretty straightforward. We've already answered some of those questions on one of the previous videos, but today we're going to be answering another one that came from a friend of ours, actually, Wayne. Before we get into that, Danny, you gave me this. Can you see that?
Yeah.
The
Word for
word for
you today.
today. So you're to blame for me to getting hooked on this because I was a Daily Bread guy and you told me to take one of these. Anyway, do you mind, Danny, if I read today's message? Because I think it's pretty applicable to what we're going to be talking about.
Of course, sure.
It's called Saved by Grace Alone. By grace, you have been saved through faith, which is Ephesians 2:8. So, in a sense, there were two prodigal sons. I've never really thought of it that way, but this here tells us that there were two prodigal sons, and both grew up in a religious culture that praised rule keepers and punished rule breakers. So, both these kids in the story of the prodigal son were raised in the same home and were raised the same way. Notice how this chapter begins. So in Ephesians, it says, all the tax collectors and sinners drew near to him, that's Jesus, and the Pharisees and the scribes complained, saying, this man receives sinners. So the church people back in the day weren't happy when Jesus was hanging around with the sinners. So he spoke this parable to them. And this is going to Luke 15, 1-3. Here Jesus was talking to two different groups. One, rule breakers, like the prodigal son, who know it's only through God's grace that we are saved. And the second group was rule keepers, like the older brother, who think they can earn or contribute to salvation by doing good works. That's funny, when I hear the story of the prodigal son, I've always related more to the prodigal, because I was a prodigal, but I realize there's a lot of the second son or the older son in me too. And that's kind of the church side of me. But anyway, and that makes rule keepers judgmental towards rule breakers. The older brother refused to attend his brother's homecoming party. Why? Listen, Father, unlike him, I have served you to keep your commandments. So that's what the older brother said to his father. Father, unlike him, that guy, I have served you and kept your commandments. This is not right or fair. Does that sound familiar? Here's what the father told him. Son, you are always with me, and all I have is yours. Observe the word son. Jesus was teaching that we're saved by relationship, not rule keeping. The older brother thought his father's acceptance depended on his performance. Yes, there's a place in God's kingdom for performance. Your rewards in heaven are based upon your performance on earth, but your redemption depends on Christ's performance only. By grace, you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourself. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. Yes, God will challenge, chasten, and cleanse you in order to change you into the person he wants you to be, but you are saved by grace alone. I think that's pretty applicable, and that's actually today's reading out of this little booklet. But it's kind of like when we talk about like the church guy and the addict, it's kind of like the two brothers of the prodigal son. One guy kind of
Exactly.
went off and got drunk and high, and the other brother stayed in the church. I played both parts there for a while, Danny. But and you did too, because basically you were the prodigal and now you're the church guy, but you still understand what it is to be a prodigal, and so do I. But the question today, I think, is pertinent to that actual reading because Wayne asked the question. So here he sent it to us in an email. He said, my question is, how do addicts in recovery that are stable communicate effectively to the church with constructive criticism or constructive change?
Mm,
I think sort of read between the lines there. I'll let you answer the question if you have an answer right away. But I think to read between the lines, Wayne is asking the question, why is it so difficult for the church to take direction from the addict? The
right.
church being the son who never rebelled, the prodigal being, well, you're lower than me and I'm not going to, I'm the favored son, so to speak. Why do you think that is, Danny?
Well,
Or how would you answer the question?
I think in my case and with my church, our church is very open to those in recovery. And it reminds me of, if you say, what can the addict do for the church or the alcoholic do for the church? It reminds me of a fellow who was in the program and he had a fondness for flowers, so he was out there in the front of the church picking the weeds, planting new flowers, putting up plaques, and he really
Mm,
beautified the church, and in a beautiful way, it brought the church community and those in recovery together because it was not only beautifying the church, but it was beautifying the world too,
mm,
and it kept him there many, many hours, and he did this free of charge, and then even some of the plants that he purchased on his own, but the church gave him some money too as well for different things. But I'm just saying, he never got paid for his work. But the time that he put in was, you couldn't pay him enough, and he really did a
mm,
wonderful, wonderful job in beautifying the church. So I think it's a nice way of saying to the church, thank you for giving us a space to meet and to fellowship and become as a family, because the
mm,
family are like those two brothers. that's
yeah.
that's like a real life family because there's always the good sheep, if you will, and the bad sheep,
Yeah.
and
Do you think, Danny, do you think there is a feeling among church people that we sort of lord over, um, people in recovery because they can't be fully trusted, or what if they, um, use again or going to embarrass us? Do you think that's sort of a bit of a tension there?
well, yes and no. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess church people call it discernment, where
Mm,
how do we know what's going to happen in the end? And I guess God really only knows, but I believe, once again, that when a church, in my case, when my church worked with me, if you will, I was still in a treatment center, and I got a job working in the church where I had keys to offices,
mm,
and money was around and what have you, and they trusted me, and I didn't want to let them down, and plus I was serious about my recovery.
mm,
I was willing to do anything, and I had all this energy because I was in a treatment center, and I had all this energy that needed to be exploited, if you will, and I did it cleaning and ministering in the church, and it was a win-win for both them and myself, and so it was a great experience for my church, but they did take a gamble, you know,
yeah.
giving a guy in treatment the keys to the palace, if you will, and
Yeah. Did that take a certain amount of time, Danny? Like, did you find that the trust grew over the years? Like, I know you were there a number of years.
yes, yes, of course, and they just put it in God's hands, I'd say, and see where it would come out to, and I worked my tail off there, doing church chore like cleanups and cutting grass and cleaning bathrooms and toilets and
Mm.
but after that, they had faith in me, and like we said in one of the other episodes, they called it ministry, and in AA we call it 12 stepping. And so I had a whole community of people who were trying to get well, and even guys who had that same energy I had. And I'd say, here, man, here's a
Mm.
mop, here's a pail, let's work together. And
Mm.
we'd kill hours together just having fun and sharing and talking and laughing. And they could actually
Yeah.
see that recovery is not all about just serious, but they saw that there's a lot of fun and laughter and good times and sharing. And
Yeah.
I love pizza, and most of the world loves pizza too. And we'd sit down, we'd have a big box of pizza and eat till we couldn't move anymore, and then we'd continue
Yeah.
on the journey. It was great. It was
Yeah.
great. It was what I needed, it was what the church needed, and it was what other people needed. So it was
Yeah.
beautiful. It was a win-win for everybody.
Danny, I wonder if you could speak more to just in this question Dwayne asks. He says, so how do addicts in recovery that are stable, so he's saying people that are, have probably a couple of years of sobriety, and how do you communicate effectively to the church? So what should, let's say somebody in recovery is in a congregation, so not going to AA meetings in the basement of that church, but participating in the Sunday morning worship and is involved in that particular body of believers. How, and if they see an area of where maybe the church needs correction and maybe their attitude towards addicts or something like that, how do they communicate effectively?
Well, there's always jobs to do in a church, whether it's greeting someone at the door, whether it's giving out communion, whether it's being part of a prayer team. So I think if they involve themselves that way, then the church will see that the person's serious about their faith and their recovery and what have you. So and churches are made of volunteers. Whether it's a bake sale, whether it's what do you call it there, garage sales and different things
Yeah,
like that. So it's a win-win for everybody involved. So
yeah,
I think actions in anything speaks louder than words. So when the church sees that there's a community of people who want to help, um, not only themselves, but to grow the church and to enrich their spirituality, there's always
mm,
room to help. And I think any minister loves another volunteer or another idea of being different, or in my case, like setting up Celebrate Life, just a different service for those in recovery.
mm,
So, but the thing is, it's an action. It's an action
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
The
Well,
person.
I guess to me, answering this question would be to go ahead and get involved in that church. So build the trust with the
Mhm.
pastor, the deacons, people that are the church secretary, whoever's on the front line of that church. Get involved, build a relationship with them, and probably not until then are you able to sort of, you know, make changes to the congregation. And when I think about it, now that you mention it, you had actually that effect on the church you went to, because you started off just going to the church, then you were actually hired by the church, and then they actually gave you a Sunday evening service called Celebrate Life, which is still going on to this day. And that was a lot of trust. They were trusting you with a service actually in the church. And I know a lot of the elders and people in that church used to come to that service because you had me in there to speak a few times. And so I'd see those people there, and even to this day, you know, the people that go to that service are not all addicts
No.
and alcoholics. They're people from the congregation that go there. So that church really has done a really good job of sort of mobilizing um, the addicts that are and alcoholics that are in their congregation. You were maybe sort of a pioneer in that,
Mhm.
in our community and in that one particular church for sure. Um, so you say just get in there, get involved, start to work, and you never felt that people looked down on you because you were
No, no,
in the program.
no. I wouldn't say that was my feeling. No, not at all. But the other part to that too, Don, is we got to remember when you shake a family tree, a lot of us fall out. So I was a lot of people's son, brother, husband, whatever. And those people, the church community I'm talking about, and the congregation, they were like my extended family, my grandma, my auntie,
Mm,
my uncle, my grandpa, all these people that I didn't have because I'm originally from Toronto and we're here in Brockville, and
mm,
so, and even people's kids, that I would try to tell them a little about my story because, you can see when someone's kids are kind of going the wrong path and what have you. And I would tell them a little of my story and hopefully that would help them out.
yeah. Do you think that that particular congregation did the same thing for other people, not just you?
I think so. I believe so. I believe so. And you know what? It's a gamble. Some
Mm,
people did well and flourished, and some people did not.
mm,
You know? So,
yeah. I wonder if that's more an unusual story. Like when I look at other churches that I've been involved with, um, usually the leadership or people that are making decisions in the church are well established, first, second generation believers who don't have a lot of baggage that we know of. As you say, you shake the tree and then everybody has baggage. I understand that. But I think churches in general might be a little reluctant to, I'm just talking from my own experience as a church guy, be reluctant to take advice and to look for leadership in somebody who's recovering or who's in
right,
recovery.
right. But, I mean, that's what church is supposed to be about, is spreading the word of God. And I'll tell you something, churches that are booming, if you will, are growing. And I remember, get invited to many different churches around the area and sharing what our church is doing so that they could help their churches grow
Yeah,
uh, in not just numbers, but in turning people on to God, right? And so they
yeah,
found it very, very interesting, as well as very educational, because really the church is, uh, normal people, normal problems.
yeah. I agree with you 100%. And I wish the church was more accepting and open to everybody. I think a lot of times, and I'm not being judgmental about any one particular church, but I think there are churches that are very exclusive, and
Mm,
they wouldn't, be that open to allowing somebody like yourself to actually start a Sunday evening service and give you the sanctuary and let you invite the speakers that you want. And I know your pastor was always there supporting you and would pray with your speakers before the service started, and that's a lot of support. And you were very
mm,
fortunate. And
mm,
I don't know if our friend Wayne has had the same experience maybe in some of the churches he's gone to,
right.
where they more want to keep you at arm's length. I mean, listen, we started today by reading this, which says we're saved by grace alone. So the highest priest in our denomination is no better than the guy who's been sober for one day.
Mm. And
Like
may I
he's
add
saved by
too, Don,
grace alone. Pardon me?
right? May I add as well that there are many ministers and priests who have addiction issues, be it
Mm.
alcohol or drugs. And so don't
Yep.
kid yourself. I've
Yep.
I've heard many speakers speak that were actually priests and or ministers who had addiction issues,
Yeah.
and and they felt that, like, I've been to school, I've been to theology school, and I've been to here, I've been there, and da 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 da. And my relationship with God is amazing, but I can't stop drinking, or I can't stop getting
Mm.
high. And I was actually in treatment in Toronto with a guy who was a minister who was an addict, and it's tough because really you've got a closer connection to God, if you will, because you've studied his word and you know him, if you will. And
Well, you have more knowledge, Danny.
exactly.
I think, what did it say here that, by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourself. It is a gift of God, not of works, lest one should boast. So, to boast that you've got, a doctorate degree or you've got a bachelor's degree in theology, the salvation question is grace is extended to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's by grace that we are saved, and it's by grace that, that we have a relationship with God.
Right.
And so
But what I,
we shouldn't be treating people any differently because
no,
of their place in life or their occupation, the color of their skin, how long they've been clean and sober. I mean, we should just be loving people regardless of their condition.
exactly. And what I was trying to say was not that they were boasting. It's
Mm,
just that we know those who have given their life to God, if you will, in a ministerial position, have that connection with God, but yet they can't stay clean and sober. And they're wondering, how can a guy like myself,
yeah,
who came from Skid Row, if you will, um, and put all my faith in God and get it, and they unfortunately could not get it, right? Or they're struggling to get it, and
yeah,
what have you, right? So I mean, I'm talking more of the poor minister or priest or who have you, who feels like God is doing for us what we could not do for themselves, but
mm,
still can't do it. Do you know what I mean? And it's that
yeah,
tug of war in their head, and but that's all addiction. You know what I mean? It's not
yeah,
them boasting by any means. It's them more kicking their pants, if you will, saying, why can't I, get this? Why
yeah.
can't I, you know?
Well, I think that, and that's one thing that you'll find if you go into any AA meeting that's full of doctors and lawyers and successful business people and even ministers, as you said. This disease doesn't pick and choose based on your education or even your upbringing. It's more in your bloodline.
Exactly.
I feel. I
Exactly.
mean, then maybe that's a discussion for another day. But just in conclusion, because we're running out of time, just to get back to Wayne's question, I guess probably the answer would be, as you've already said, you need to gain the credibility within that particular church where you're involved, and gain trust probably from the leadership of that church, and then begin. Wayne goes on to say he has some ideas. I think based on his sales experience, he give two praises. So he says one negative, two praises for a negative. So if you want to recommend a change, even within the church, tell them they're doing something really good over here, and then say, but maybe we could improve this over here. That's just a strategy to help people be more open to your ideas. So that was
Yeah.
Wayne's way of answering the question himself. But anyway, good question. And thank you, Wayne, for sending it in. Again, if other people have questions, just send them to thechurchguyandtheaddict@gmail.com. And we'll be happy to answer them well, we won't answer the questions, but we'll definitely comment on them and to give you our opinion on them from the perspective of a church guy and an addict. So great seeing you again today, Danny, and great seeing everybody who's watching in on us. God
God
bless.
bless.
Thanks, Danny.
Peace. Thanks.